Hi, kitty cats. Human identity, I think we all know this, is not only biology. Humans have a great range of experiences that simply can't be captured by genetics alone. Now, I've said this many, many times. As I was reading a book this week about by an esoteric author named Storm Faerywolf, I found a model of queer self-discovery that was called the Amethyst Pentacle. Not Amethysta Pentacle, but there you go. Hey, Amber. Now, I really like this model, and it's not just because it has the word amethyst in it. The model really breaks down how I see each of us discovering and manifesting our identity over the course of our life. So, today, I want to take a break from all of the politics that I've been talking about, talk about some fun stuff. It's really kind of philosophy, but it's called the Amethyst Pentacle. And then, luckily, we have Amber here. As they say in Super Lesbian Animal RPG, we're not out of the Amber Woods yet. So let's try to get the guild to safety, and we'll save the town. Let me say hello to a couple of people. I already see. So I already said Amber. I see Brenda. Hello, Brenda. It has been a while since you've been here. So Margie says she cannot participate today. She is going to see the doctor. So, blessings to you, Margie. Hopefully all works out well. I also saw Genevieve, and I also see Angela as well. I think I got a little bit of lipstick on my teeth, don't I? Hello, Slay Duck Cookie. Oh my gosh, look, my wife's there. Julian Hornhouse. I'm not sure I've seen you before. Sounds good. Thank you. All right, let me do my little opening stuff. First of all, I'm Dr. Amethysta Herrick. I am both a scientist and a content creator. Typically what I do is discuss identity and gender using the scientific method. It'll be interesting today. I'm going to talk a little bit about philosophy instead, but it's still identity. You can find more information about me and the work that I do at my website, which you can see down below. That is purplepawclan.com. If you go there, I have a page dedicated just to myself. And you can see all the social media networks that I'm on. You can read the articles that I write. You can listen to and watch the podcasts that I record with very interesting people. In fact, I just released one Friday with a very interesting author. And finally, you can also check out the hypnotherapy work that I do to help people work through some of their issues with identity and gender. Oh my gosh, Chiropter Girl is here. Hello. And the Pokey Guy 7 says, how am I doing? I am doing okay. And I hope, Pokey Guy, you are doing all right as well. If you would like to support this work, all of that I'm talking about, articles and podcasts and hypnotherapy, you can get a subscription, first of all, on my website for as little as $5 a month. But even if you just sign up for my free newsletter that publishes about every 2 weeks, that's a way to support me as well. If you follow me on social media, you can like, you can share. Those are all the things. And then finally, I also publish other people's work on my website, the Purple Paw Clan website. So if you'd like to contribute your original work about identity and gender, please email me. There's a contact page on my website, which once again, purplepawclan.com. I swear I'm done. So Chiropter Girl says she loves my shirt. So here's I like this one. This was this year's Elvira Pride shirt. Hopefully you can see that. I'm going to end up getting banned if I, turn this a little bit more explicit, but it's Elvira sitting on a pride moon. It's a lot of fun. I get a good kick out of that. Okay. So here's why I'm here. Yeah. See, Chiropter Girl says she loves the Elvira rep, right? So I want to tell you a quick bit about Elvira. So I lived in Los Angeles. I grew up in Los Angeles. The original show that she had was 1981, 1982, something like that, somewhere in the general area. I was 11 or 12 years old. I had a very late puberty as well. So this will all come together, I swear. But I had very late puberty, and so I watched Elvira. I'm looking at Elvira going, oh my gosh, I hope I turn into that. Mainly I was thinking the head and the hair and the makeup and everything and her attitude because I was very shy. Anyway, I have always loved Elvira. One of these days I need to to meet Cassandra Peterson. If you're watching, Cassandra, hi. I don't think she's watching. So, all right. So here's what I want to talk about today. There is a book named The Satyr's Kiss. You can go and find this. So Storm Faerywolf is an esoteric author. He is the author of this book, The Satyr's Kiss. I interviewed him on my podcast, I don't know, sometime in the past year. Let's say that. In fact, actually, I interviewed him twice. It was a huge pain. We had a great conversation. And then as it turned out, the somehow like the audio didn't come through or something like that. And I'm like, oh, I can't. I was so upset. And I sent him an email and I said, hey, I'm so sorry. I guess we're just going to have to let it go. And he says, well, that's fine. We can record again. And I went, really? So we did. We talked about, the second time we talked about the same things. But we talked about gender and sexuality as it pertains to spirituality. Let's go with spirituality. Really, we talked a lot about magic, our existence in the universe, how we actually exist here in the universe as ourselves. So Storm's book, The Satyr's Kiss, as we were talking, I can't remember if we recorded this or not. Really doesn't matter. But he said, oh, you ought to read this book because it's about, technically it's about gay men. So it's really about, because Storm is gay, Storm sort of writes about his own experience coming out and especially as a gay man in witchcraft. So that was sort of a big thing to him. So the book is about being gay and how you can integrate being queer into a spiritual practice. Now he brought it up. He said he wondered what I would think of the book. He tells me, it really focuses on gender and sexuality, especially how our queerness does change the way we move through the universe, energetically, just in general. Now, somewhere in these discussions, here's finally the point. To finally get to the point, Storm says, oh, you know what? There's an exercise in there called the Amethyst Pentacle. So he didn't talk about it much. He just said, oh, yeah, go check out the Amethyst Pentacle. I'd be interested in your thoughts. So it's one of these exercises. It's a model and an exercise that's in this book, The Satyr's Kiss. And again, that's a good book. I'm really enjoying it. I'm about a third of the way through it. And I will tell you, in my opinion, it's been a good read. So Grievance Takashi says that the universe owes them $50. Jeez. Well, I hope you can collect. That would be good. Anyway, this was like a year ago. Storm says, go and read this book. This video is finally a list of my thoughts. I'm considering turning this into a set of articles, like a series of articles. But I'm going to need to get pretty ambitious in order for that to happen. We'll see what happens. For now, what I want to do is just go through what the Amethyst Pentacle is. There is a difference. Storm is right. I mean, he's not kidding. That book was written targeted toward gay men. I am not a gay man. Maybe you've noticed this. I am not a gay man, but I feel it does have very good significance for anybody in the queer community. Because most of us have to come to terms with who we are. We might even have to defend ourselves, for who we are. And then I realized, I was like, this is a really common human experience. Like nobody, Grievance Takashi, didn't get out of having to define an identity. The difference between the queer community being forced to and somebody else is whether or not you're going to accept somebody else's version of you. Or if you go deep into who you are and create that person. I think that we... Oh, wait, Charlotte says... First of all, hi, Charlotte. Charlotte says 50 million. The universe owes Grievance Takashi 50 million bucks. That was a typo. Okay. Today what I'm going to talk about, I'm going to take Storm's original work with the Amethyst Pentacle as it applied to gay men. And then I generalized it a bit. I changed a couple of the words, to feel more encompassing of human identity as opposed to a gay man's coming out experience and integrating with the rest of the universe. I'm not saying Storm's model is bad. I actually really loved it. The first time I read it, I was actually lying in a bath and I was just like, oh, this is so beautiful. Maybe it was because I was in a bath. I don't know. But it's beautiful. I have customized it, customized the Amethyst Pentacle to my work. I don't know, maybe I should call it the Amethysta Pentacle. I don't know. And we were going to do that. Then after that, we have Super Lesbian Animal RPG. As I said, we're not out of Amber Woods yet. Amber, you've got to be going, I didn't know anybody was in me. There was a dungeon or something, so we'll explore that further. Should be fun. All right, I'm going to share a screen here, okay? You're going to have to bear with me. I got a lot of windows open. I'm going to hope this all works. So we're going to first of all switch over to Photoshop. Ooh, are we? Yeah, we are. All right. The Amethyst Pentacle. Here's a quick introduction. It starts off with a star. A pentacle, right? And I made it purple. It seemed appropriate. It's the Amethyst Pentacle. I colored it purple. Why not? Now, a pentacle is a shape, but as humans draw it, let me actually move my mouse over there. Where's the thing? Here we go. As humans draw it, and I don't know if you can see my mouse. Hopefully you can. But as humans draw it, there is always a path. So if you start from the top and you continue sunwise, so you start here and you go down to this, going sunwise, up to here, down to there, and then back up to the top. Nothing surprising now, let's hope. It creates a cycle, and that cycle has 5 stops along the way. And those stops are connected to each other. You know, each one is connected to two other stops on the path. The stops on the pentacle correspond to states, like states of being. These are states of being that a human will find themselves in all through life. Let me actually show those. Where's the thing? Okay, here we go. So things like you start off with innocence. And innocence will turn into desire. And desire can turn into awakening. Then awakening can turn into oneness. And then oneness can turn into expression, which can lead back up to innocence. So we have a cycle. All well and good. These states are not states that we experience just once. The cycle is different for every characteristic that we would even consider about ourselves. And the cycle is truly a cycle. It starts and it ends, and then it begins over again. Now, some of us go through the entire cycle over and over, of course. Some of us don't. Some of us go, oh, that's too hard. I'm not going to bother with it. But think of these as states of being. Let me check really fast okay, good. States of being. So as well as there being stops, as well as there being vertices, right? I'm very all mathematic here. As well as being vertices, there are paths on the pentacle, and these correspond to processes. So the process, in order to move from one state to another, we have to take some sort of action. And action is a process. It's recognizing the first state of being and then changing it to another state of being. Now, again, these processes are different for every characteristic we consider about ourselves, but, oh gosh, where's the thing? Here it is. So we have processes. As you move from innocence to desire, you feel a sense of isolation. As you move from desire to awakening, you go through a process of integration. As you go from one awakening into oneness, you go through a process of realization. As you go from oneness to expression, you go through a process of bravery. You have to have an act of bravery. And as you go back from expression back into innocence, it requires an act of liberation. You don't have to remember all these right off the bat, okay? I'm going to remove these all again. I'm just using Photoshop. It's kind of... Possibly I could have done something with, a little bit snazzier, but here's what you get. So we're going to start off. What I want to do is talk through each of these states and the process that it takes to get there. There are also intersections. I did not write anything about intersections. I've been thinking about these because it's really interesting to consider the intersectionality of our identity overlapping in some way with the intersections of these paths on the Amethyst Pentacle. But I'm going to let it go for now. So let's talk about innocence. We're just looking at innocence here. Let me check comments really fast. No, none. All right. So just as so these intersections, that's one thing I have yet to really to think about. But I mean, I thought about it some, but I'm kind of like, All right, innocence. Innocence is an interesting state. This is a state, if you just talk about, what it means. Oh, and by the way, let me go ahead and, here we go. I can go back to the talking head here. There we go. Just so you don't have to look at the death by PowerPoint, right? So here we go. Innocence is interesting. Innocence is a state in which we tend to, oh, Angel is here. Hi, Angel. Innocence is a state where we tend to be unaware, in which we are unaware of substantive differences. If you think about it in terms of a justice system, right? Innocence means free from guilt. And guilt sort of plays into a little bit of this, right? When we perceive that we're different, that there are substantive differences, sometimes that hurts. Sometimes it hurts a lot. In fact, sometimes others will hurt us for having that difference. And maybe we experience guilt, but we only experience that guilt when we perceive that we're different in a way that is substantive. Love and hugs to you too, Angel. There is also, if you look at some religious traditions, they will call innocence being free from sin. So like Adam and Eve were innocent in the Garden of Eden. I don't really care too much for that, because really what that means is that there are inherently sinful parts to being human. So I'm disagreeing with that. When I think of innocence, this is a state in which we're unaware of a substantive difference between us and somebody else. Innocence can be both lost and regained. So I already mentioned, when we perceive being difficult or different, if we go, hey, that's not substantive. If you go, you don't like my hair? It's fine. I'm still going to wear my hair like this. I got no guilt. I remain in innocence. And that's precisely what this model is all about, the Amethyst Pentacle. It's moving from a state of innocence, going through the other 4 states of being, doing the hard work to get through all of those processes, and returning to that state of innocence, where you don't feel different, where you're capable of loving everything about yourself. So how do we lose the innocence? I choked myself. I can't believe it. Innocence is lost because we perceive a difference. Maybe those differences are social norms. I'll throw a couple out there. Should a boy be able to wear a dress? Should a girl be able to kiss a girl? Now I talked about gender and sexuality, but what about should the son of a doctor be able to become an artist? When we perceive that who we are is not the same as everybody else, then innocence gets lost. And it's really easy to stop here. This is my typical point here. We could stop here. We could perceive a difference, and then we could go, well, that difference isn't substantive. You could say, yes, I like purple hair, you don't. Done. We could also just believe we're right and other people are wrong. That can get into a dysfunction, and I'll talk about dysfunction later. But we could stop here. Angela, I'm going to get to your comment. To go back to this diagram, we could stop here, but if we perceive this difference, then we go, click on the thing there we go. if we perceive that there is a difference, we go through a process of isolation. So isolation, I'm going to keep that up for just one moment. Where's my, oh, here it is. Innocence is lost through this process. We realize what we like is different from what somebody else likes. And it's different in a way that matters. It's a way that's substantive. Innocence, the state of innocence is our difference not mattering. Isolation is when we believe, yeah, this difference does matter. So it's not just the actions either. It might not just be what we like. It might not be wanting to do something, depending upon whether we're going against social norms. That could reflect on the whole person. In the queer community in particular, our whole humanness might be considered different or immoral. So this process of isolation singles us out. We realize we're in this group of one, and that one might not be very popular. So what does that turn into? I'm going to go back to Photoshop. Where did it go? Here it is. So what that turns into is when we have gone through innocence, when we've lost our innocence and go through this process of isolation to a group of one, we end up at a state of desire. Desire. Let me check comments really fast, and then I'm going to go back to, I'll go back to my head. There we go. So comments. Okay, so, Angela says, when she knew something wrong, when she knew something was wrong and then started to feel, I should read this. When I knew something was wrong, then start to feel where I need to go, but on my own. Oh, personality changes. Yes. So innocence, I think, or this whole process is where you feel something is wrong, but then you go, no, I'm going to figure this out on my own. You can change your personality. And I think that's the purpose of the Amethyst Pentacle, ultimately, is to help people go, you know what, I'm okay, and I'm going to allow myself be okay. So anyway, desire. Hi, Emily. I see Emily is here. So just to recap again, let me put us back on Photoshop. So when we start, we start at a sense of innocence, a state of innocence. We go through a process of isolation. Now we've reached desire. So let's go back to desire. What is desire? Desire is this first inkling, as Angela just put it, that maybe this difference shouldn't matter. Shouldn't matter. Right now you've applied a judgment to this sense of isolation. You've gone, geez, I'm in a group of one. That doesn't seem right. And oftentimes, this is named desire because oftentimes when we're told we shouldn't do something, really makes us think about it more. There are a lot of stories about yogis. Somebody goes to a guru and says, hey, I just want to achieve enlightenment. And the guru goes, no problem. Go home, but don't think about a monkey. Okay? Guy comes back a week later and goes, gosh, apparently I'm not very enlightened because I kept thinking about a monkey. How am I going to achieve enlightenment? And the guru goes, yeah, see, that's the point. You can't even stop thinking about a monkey. How are you supposed to control the rest of your thoughts? This manifests another way, like every parent, right? Every parent knows if you want to get your kid to do something, just tell them not to do the opposite, right? You go, oh, gosh, you're not eating the broccoli? That's good because we should really give it to the hamsters. You really shouldn't eat that. And then the kid goes, well, oh, hang on, maybe I should. Is broccoli bad? Maybe I'll try the broccoli. There you go. But we keep thinking about this. We're wondering. We're ruminating. Is the desire really that bad? Is what we like that bad? Maybe it turns into an internet search. Maybe it's talking to somebody you know. Maybe it's talking to Angela, who's got a lot of experience here. Maybe we need to understand why we desire what we do. Now, we could stop here, right? We could stop here. Desires are not the same as actions. We could stop. If the difference is substantive, maybe we're going to decide it's not worth the risk. because the risk might get you kicked out of social areas. It may be not worth it. You could stop here. You go, I've got the desire, I've lost my innocence, I feel isolated, but that's fine. Instead, what you could do, here we go, I love this. Angel says, yeah, the food, this is the way to do it. You said it much better than I did. Giving it to the hamster sucks. That was a terrible example. You just go, that food or that book or that whatever, it's kind of too grown up for you. You're not going to like it. And then, of course, 10 years later, they're like, this is the greatest thing ever. I know, I'm glad. So here's the point. So Angela says, the desire just gets stronger. Like, you could stop there. You could go, it's not that big of a deal. It's not that big of a deal. The difference is too substantive. But the desire will just get stronger. And you know that you have to take it further. You know you do. And that's how, let me turn this off. Here we go. Now I got to go back to Photoshop. That's how you enter. Oh, I got to put you on. There we go. Got to show it too. It won't make any sense. That's when you begin this process of integration. Oh, integration. You've gone through a process of isolation and you've been turned into a group of one. Now you need to perform a process of reintegration. That reintegration, that desire is first the desire for knowledge. Could there be other people out there doing what I'm doing? Is this a crime? Is this a taboo? Will this get me in trouble? Do chicks think it's cool if I do this? Integration. It might just be learning a label, right? People who desire are called whatever, might be learning a label. But this process of labeling a desire now integrates us into a concept. Now we can turn the desire into an action, possibly even into an experience. But first we have to be able to figure out what it even is. And let me go back to this. That ends up turning into awakening. Awakening. All right, we can talk about, so here we go. We've gone from a state of innocence. We felt isolated. Now we feel the desire. We've got to do this. We've got to figure it out. So we start figuring it out. We get a label. And now we can go, oh, we have a label that isn't that interesting. Now we've reached this state of, oh shoot, here we go. Now we've reached this state of awakening. Let me turn off the talking head so I can talk about it. Awakening. Let's look at the comments too. See, here's the thing. I'm trying to talk about identity and everybody's like, oh yeah, well see, this is about gender, right? Hi, Slayman Sir. I'm sorry, I don't say that well. I do like, I do kind of like the color purple, right? So Emily mentions she knew she was transgender long ago. Angela brings up an interesting point. In the 1970s, especially specifically in the UK, it was a crime. Crazy. This integration ultimately, I think Brenda makes an excellent point. You hit a critical mass. You go, listen, I don't have any choice but to investigate this further. So stand by on this. This is going to be this is interesting. When you look at, turn that off. Awakening. Once you can label a desire, you can investigate it completely. Now you can find websites. Now you can find locations where maybe they do what it is you desire to do. Maybe you can find education. Because once again, remember I was talking about doctors' children turning into artists too. It's not, I mean, I recognize being transgender is 100% what we're talking about here. But once we experience something in other actions, not necessarily our actions, certainly not our actions at this point, but once we experience it, we awaken that experience inside ourselves. Everybody here, well, a lot of the people here, if I use the words egg crack, it's exactly what the awakening is. We've seen what the desire means. Now we can't unsee it. The thing with awakening is that it can be so painful. So painful. Maybe we don't want to assume a label. Because maybe if we assume a label, what it's going to do is get us kicked out of groups that we want to belong to. Maybe it's going to get us kicked out of a political group or a social group, a religious group. And so, I keep saying this, we can stop here. We can just stop. We can believe that the desire is wrong. That yes, there is a difference and it is substantive, but we are wrong. The social norm is right. And we can go, you know what? I believe this desire should never be made real, should never be brought out into the universe. See, here we go. Angela says she started to awaken to people in the news who were transgender, just like she felt. And I mean, I'll tell you, when I was young, when I was a kid, oh yeah, you might get kicked out of a family. Sleiman Yassir says as well. See, you might get kicked out of your family. When I was a kid, like there were characters that I saw on television that I was like, how about that? I remember there was, I don't know who it was. I remember there was somebody on, what the hell was it called? Oh, All in the Family with Archie Bunker. He had a cousin, or I don't even really remember who it was. All I remember about this person is that at one point, the character walks down the stairs and is very flamboyant, and Archie's like, oh, you know, whatever. Does the, oh, Jesus, whatever. Jesus Christ, eat it. And there you go. But I remember seeing this person and going, why is that wrong? Here's somebody who's wearing feminine clothing, I think supposed to be masculine. Why is that wrong? So we could stop here. Anyway, here we go. So we could stop here. So now we got to pull back up. Oh gosh. So now I got to pull this back up. So we could stop here, but we could also go through this process of realization. So here we go. Realization. Realization is an interesting state, or is an interesting process. Realization is saying that you have to accept once seen, never unseen. You have to accept that you own that label and that you can make it yours. You start to believe that maybe fulfilling this desire is going to be better than suppressing it. Now we get to a point where we can begin to make this real in our lives. Now we're at a point where maybe we might even take action ourselves. And that leads us to, where's the thing? Here it is. That leads us to oneness. Before I talk about oneness, give me one sec. I'm going to do my station identification stuff. I'm Dr. Amethysta Herrick. I am a scientist, and today I'm talking about a model of identity called the Amethyst Pentacle. And this is it right here on the screen. Look at that. All right, oneness. Let's get back to oneness. Let me actually move this thing off. Here we go. Talking head. Okay, oneness. We have, oh shoot, hang on. I'm sorry, folks. You'd think I'd practice this. No. So we've moved from this state of innocence. We've become isolated, and we've gone, no, I do have to figure out what this desire is. Through the ability of finding a label, we end up sort of integrating into a group. And that group gives us the ability to awaken within ourselves that maybe what this group represents is us too. Now, realization is actually bringing that into ourselves. So now we have this state of oneness. I've said before that gender transition takes, the first two steps are the worst two. The first one is accepting that you are transgender. That's awakening. The second one is believing that it's okay. That it's okay for you to be transgender, and that it's okay for you to do something about it. That believing that you're okay and able to do something about it, that is the oneness. You've accepted this desire ought to be fulfilled. You've accepted the label privately. Now, we could stop here, right? We could. We don't have to believe that we're allowed to take action. We've gotten to this point. We go, okay, I own this. I accept this. But we don't have to believe that we're allowed to take this action. We could spend the rest of our lives knowing we'd like to, but denying ourselves. And I think there are probably a few people here who can, you know, who understand what I'm talking about. There's a word I was looking for. I was going to say correlate. What the hell's my word? The word I'm looking for. I like this. I love how Emily says she loves being transgender. I got to tell you, I wasn't very happy at the beginning. I feel much better now, for what it's worth. And I do like being transgender. I do appreciate that I have a different take on identity than the rest of the world. I think that's important. And I think when you've gotten, so Angela, when you've gotten to the you can't stop no matter how you try, this is where you've now said, okay, I do believe I'm allowed to take action. Not only do I believe I'm allowed to take action, but damn it, I am going to. So Genevieve, was Beverly LaSalle, was that Archie Bunker's like a stepbrother, or like maybe Edith's something? I don't really remember. Who's Beverly LaSalle? Maybe I should just ask that. That's probably easier. So here we go. Let me return to the Photoshop dealy here. I really should have done this in something else. All right, so we've at oneness. We've achieved oneness. We believe that we should take action, and now we have to go through a process of bravery. You have to have some bravery. You have to go through a process where you recognize that what you desired was initially a substantive difference. Maybe a difference substantive enough to stop. And maybe you go, I don't really want to make waves. But here is where we've, exactly with what Angela just said, you can't stop no matter how you try. You're going to reject that social norm, and that takes bravery. You don't have a choice. But you do have to go through this process where you suck it up and go and do it. So here we go. So Angela says she accepted that she was transgender and knew she could go through with it when her mother accepted her. Wow, that's amazing too. I love that. So it was your mother accepting you that gave you the strength that gave you the rest of the bravery necessary to do it. I think that's beautiful for what it's worth. All right, I have left this thing up here because, so now we've gone through oneness, you have an act of bravery, and now you have the state of expression. The state of expression. This is important. Oh, here we go. Okay, so Genevieve says Beverly LaSalle Archie saves her life in his taxi cab, so she becomes Edith's friend. Maybe. That could be. I don't remember who it was. All I remember is seeing somebody and going, I wonder who that was. I wonder what that is. And I was super young. I mean, I was, single digits. Okay, expression. We finally got into expression. Expression, now you've accepted the desire, and now we perform the action. Oh, Genevieve, that's what yes. That is it. So Genevieve says that Beverly LaSalle ends up being killed for being a female impersonator. Yes, I remember she dies. I have the feeling this is who we're talking about. Thank you for telling me. I've had that memory in the back of my head forever, and always kind of wondered what the hell it was. So thank you for helping me out with that. All right, expression. We have finally gotten to expression. We've accepted the desire. We've believed that we can perform the action, and now we've summoned the bravery, and now we're going to perform the action. Now you can experience. Now you have the experience. And who knows? Maybe the experience is pleasant. You don't know unless you try it. This is, one of the things that all my parents kept telling me, right? They said, you need to eat your broccoli. And I said, I don't want to. And then they said, you know what, you're right. It's too grown up. And I went, give me all the broccoli. So expression. We could stop here. We could express who we are. And we could always believe it's wrong. You could say to yourself, yeah, sure, this feels good. But we always end up feeling guilty. And I know plenty of possibly transgender women who originally bought some clothing and then they'd bring it in and then, purge it, right? Maybe some of you, have done this yourself. We could stop here. We could go, this feels great, but I'm going to end up feeling guilty. And that's just how it goes. So finally, we're going to hit this. Where is it? Did it go? That's weird. Okay, go back to this. Okay, so in order to stop feeling guilty, we end up going through this last process, liberation. Liberation is when we recognize that all of our experiences are only part of a greater human experience. This is the point where you end up being able to return to that state of innocence. Because whether or not the difference is substantive, and maybe you think, well, it's not, actually, all I'm doing is wearing different clothes from somebody else, that is not a substantive difference. Or you might actually say, it might be different, but it's not wrong. And I think that's ultimately where what ends up being liberating is that you end up going, you know what, I'm not going to allow this substantive difference to hold me back. So it might be different, but it's not wrong. And once you've done that, now we can return to, now you can see we're back at innocence. And at innocence, now we are unaware. Remember, originally the way I put it is that it is the state of being unaware of any substantive difference between you and the rest of the world, whatever. So there you go. That is the whole cycle. I kept on saying, and I kind of enjoyed it too. I kept on saying, we could stop here. So there's one last point that I do want to bring up, and I don't even need to show this anymore. I'm going to go back to this. Okay. All right, I'm going to show a couple of things. So first of all, so Genevieve says actually we should be using the words he, or the pronoun he, not she, because Beverly LaSalle was not transgender. She was a female impersonator. So I guess, a drag performer, as we call it now. So, I do want to show here a couple more comments. So Brenda says she denied being transgender for decades and then hid it for years. Yep, that sounds pretty familiar. Even after Brenda accepted that she was transgender, she thought she was sick. She had to shove it down. I don't think I thought I was sick, but I did think I had to shove it down. And then finally, like most of us do, we hit a point where you just can't live any longer the way you are. And so you change, or what? Shuffle off that mortal coil? Maybe. Angela says, sure, once she transitioned, she was so happy, so accepted. Oh, sorry, I missed this one, Angela. I meant to pop it up. As far as bravery goes, too, Angela also brings up, it takes bravery to tell people, she was transgender in 1990, when most people had no idea what that even meant. To be clear, I don't think a lot of people today know what it means to be transgender. But then Amber agrees, oh yeah, sure, this is it, right? You get to a point where you cannot live any longer like that. Brenda brings up, the purge. Right? There's the purge. Once you stop purging, now you've gone through the process of liberation. Ooh, the purge. Thousands of dollars and some gorgeous clothes. Yeah, down the drain. I'm not laughing. It's more crying than anything. Where was the other? Here we go. Okay. Ooh, a lot of people have joined. I'm sorry, a lot of people I missed. Dysfunction. I want to talk about stopping. I kept on saying you could stop here. I believe, first of all, innocence is the natural state for humans. Assuming that no human rights get violated, no human action is inherently wrong. It's humans who put subjective judgments on actions. Actions that become taboo are only taboo because of social norms. No other reason. And social norms are not laws. As Judith Butler pointed out, 35 years ago, 34, whatever, almost 35, social norms can change. That's why they're called social norms. Hi, Minnie. If we choose to stop at any state, that's ultimately where we experience dysfunction. That's when it hurts. That's when it manifests as something else. And I will tell you, even innocence needs to be moderated, right? Because I think we have some very innocent people. How do I want to put this? We have a lot of people in the government who maintain this state of innocence because they don't recognize that the things that they want are substantively different from what most people should. Opheliac 13. Wow, I love that name. Hi. So even innocence needs to be moderated. You have to make sure you don't violate other people's human rights. Once you get to the desire state, desire should always be tested. If you look at something, you go, that looks interesting, maybe you'll love it. Maybe it ends up becoming a very important part of who you are. You're not going to know that unless you try it. If you have a desire, you should always test it. If you reach an awakening, that awakening should always be understood. When you accept a new label, you accept a new aspect of identity. This is significant. Once you reach that state of oneness, it requires manifestation. Because if you know you want it, you only end up frustrated. Here you go, this is perfect. Oh, this is perfect. Genevieve says, I carried the secret for 56 years. It eats you alive. Yeah. Eventually, you're going to have to set the inner girl free. There you go. Oneness requires manifestation. And then once you get to the expression, it demands self-acceptance. It's only by believing we deserve our entire experience that we can return to innocence. I'm not going to kid you. I don't do all of these great. That's not my point, right? I'm not telling you I'm perfect. One of the big places I struggle is in that liberation. I got to the point where, to go through the whole thing, pretty early on, I realized that I was different, that there was a substantive difference, but that desire never stopped. I continued to try it. I went through an awakening by the time I was in my early 20s and said, hey, this is totally okay. Going through my realization to get to a sense of oneness. And then I stayed there for 4 decades or so. About 4 to not quite. Then I sat there for 40 years. And finally I gave it expression. And here we are, all together here. I'm still struggling with the liberation. Do I deserve all of this? Do I deserve this experience? I'd love to return to innocence. And I hope that, we can all do the same. So that was all I had to say. I'm going to look at, I know I have at least one question there, so let me check that out. Here's another one. See, so Angela says she got to a stage where she couldn't pretend and started to act so feminine that people noticed. Then she told them who they were. Amber says it comes to a point you just can't hide anymore. Charlotte says she knew as a child that things weren't right. Her friend's second mom, wow, transitioned in 2000. Oh, wow. And it really brought out fighting in herself. That's cool. And trying to stay in denial. It's not cool, but I appreciate that you saw somebody do this in 2000. That's pretty neat. I'm going to love this question, I think. So Dodgy Archetype asks, can they ask a somewhat critical yet hopefully constructive question regarding the pentagram? Yeah, please. I'd love to see that. Because I don't think this is necessarily a perfect model. I know there's a lot of, there's a whole lot of the human experience that I think can I just got a little message here. I should probably silence my notifications. There we go, done. I know that there are aspects of the Amethyst Pentacle that could likely be firmed up. I won't kid you, I did all of the changes there. So it's right now. So it's almost 3:00. So I started work on this about 9 this morning. I made that Photoshop diagram that I used there and then wrote all of my notes. And most of what it took was actually making that Photoshop diagram. I always think I'm pretty good in Photoshop. And then I'm like, how the hell do I do the what and the what? And then there was geometry and like angles and stuff, So anyway, I spent a lot of time thinking about this, but my point is, as I was making the diagram, that's when I was changing it from Storm's initial model that I saw in the Satyr's Kiss. Which again, I'm going to throw back out there. If you're looking for a good book, it doesn't even have to be, the book is a lot about just sort of owning who you are. And I think that is I think it's something that all of us could use. The ability to say, you know what? I'm going to come into who I am and be happy about it. So Dodgy Archetype, if it's not clear to you, I am totally wasting time until you put that question in there. But so here we go. So Charlotte says, so Charlotte was in a relationship. I cut off the second half of this, but so Charlotte was in a relationship. And the fear of ruining that after 20 years. So she spent 20 years worried she was going to ruin the relationship, and finally she accepted herself. And I think this is the best part. She can't believe where she is now and how much time she's missed as herself. Yeah, it is such a blessing to be in transition. I think it's the most beautiful thing ever. I wanted to frame the whole pentacle in terms of just the human experience, human identity. But it was so absolutely, when I read it, and Storm uses his own experience as a gay man to go through that, I just went, wow, that is so 100% what happened to me. So this was in what, 1990? Angela says she went to the bank Christmas party as her real self. The management didn't know what was happening. Wow. The new year they wanted to talk about it. Good. And hopefully they went, hey, listen, can we have a good conversation about this, as opposed to, all right, cut that shit off. What are you doing? Don't mess up our Christmas parties with a skirt. Which happens. You could look at this whole thing. This whole thing depends, and maybe Dodgy Archetype's going to go here. This whole thing depends on us accepting that there are differences that are substantive between us and the rest of the world. Now, each of us is obviously an individual. So this happens. Each of us has, what I've called the origin of identity. It's who we know who we are inside. It's the deep-seated desires, the deep-seated knowledge of who we are. And I guess one of the things that I do look at this and I kind of go, it's a bummer. Although absolutely the human experience is that we end up having to accept that. We have to agree. Our difference is substantive and worth caring about. And I don't know, maybe that's where you're going, Dodgy Archetype. I couldn't tell, but So let's see. That's that. I'm gonna pop it up one more time just because I did sort of like the diagram. When it came down to it, I did like the diagram. So I will mention too. So here's some things too. So Storm uses the word innocence. So I'll tell you where I've changed it. Storm uses the word innocence. Storm uses the word desire. Uses the word awakening, but then uses the word identity. Now, I didn't like the word identity because I thought that all of these were aspects of identity. The way that Storm explains it is, we've taken it as part of our identity. And I appreciated that, and that's why I thought, well, I'll call it oneness. I don't know if the little blue, is the blue thing showing up? Yeah, it's kind of highlighting. And then Storm did use the word expression. Ooh, don't do that, apparently. Okay. And then did use the word expression. So I did change that a little bit from identity to oneness. As far as the processes go, isolation was originally called strangeness. So it's a way of realizing that we are different. And so I wanted to make each of these an action. You know, I wanted each of the states to be a noun, or as noun, as static as possible. And then each of the paths to be as dynamic as possible. So strangeness is a state. And so I chose the word isolation to say we go through this process of isolation. I'm trying to remember what word Storm used here. Resonance. Resonance. The idea that you found an idea and you go, yeah, I resonate with that. I chose integration because I liked the idea of pulling yourself away, but then being drawn back into something. So I chose integration there. Realization. Ooh, I do not remember what Storm uses here. Ooh, I cannot remember. Not that important. I chose the word realization because I think of like Abraham Maslow and the pyramid of self-realization. The realization is something that actually does turn something into our identity. Storm uses courage here. I chose bravery just because it sounded a little better. And then liberation, Storm chose freedom, and I used liberation because, again, I just wanted to turn it into a verb type thing. So there is that. I like this thing. I really enjoy the model as a whole. I guess the only thing that I would love to consider is these intersections. How do these intersections start kind of coming together? All right, I'm gonna go back to this, and I'm hoping like hell that I got a comment. Okay, so here we go. So Angela does says, yeah, it was 1990. Okay, it was 1990 when she went to the bank Christmas party. They were understanding. Oh, found out what a transgender woman was, and then a few weeks later you changed to Angela just like that. I don't think, I'm going to say this, and it's not going to come out exactly right. I don't think that's a typical experience. I think I'm just going to say that. I doubt that's typical. It is an amazing experience, especially to have happened 35 years ago, but holy cats, I don't know that happens all the time. Amber says no. Amber says, no, that's not typical. Not in the least. So, one thing I think I'm going to do, so it is 3 o'clock, at least on my side, thinking about taking a break. That way I can at least, get a drink of water. I can feel my throat going, you know what, can you give me a little bit of help here? So what I'm going to do is I'll take a quick break and then dodgy archetype, take your time. So let me do that. I'll come back, and then if we have the time, it would be sweet. We can play some Slarpage, super lesbian animal RPG, and we will be back. So give me 5 minutes and I will be right back. Oh.